Merry Christmas, everyone! My name is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the Christmas Special Retrospectives. And since last year we took a look at one particular version of Santa, I think it's only appropriate that this year we look at another. As today, ladies and gentlemen, the Christmas special that we will be discussing is the Netflix original movie, Klaus. Now, my history with this movie. This is one that is kind of not a colorful history, but it is it's a kind of a substandard one. Basically, when the Klaus movie came out on Netflix, I was aware of it, but never really gave it the time of day. It's not because I wasn't interested. My mom had been watching it on Netflix, and it looked interesting enough. I liked the animation style, and it seemed to have plenty of heart behind it, but just nothing really compelled me to actually go and see it. I was interested, I just never made the time. However, and that kind of stayed that way for at least a handful of years. However, either last year or the year before, I was hanging out with some of my online friends on Discord, and we all wound up watching the Klaus movie together. And as a result, I was able to finally see the movie with mine own eyes, and yeah, I can easily say I was missing out. When I wound up watching the movie, it at first did feel like just a standard, animated Christmas movie with plenty of funny jokes, kind of quirky characters, and clearly some kind of two-dimensional villains that the heroes had to overcome in order to save Christmas and all that stuff. But beneath all of that, there was something else that really makes the film stand out. And the instant that I saw that, I was hooked. And hands down, I thought to myself, why didn't I see this earlier? And so, when it came time for me to do a poll on what I would be looking at for this Christmas, I put Klaus on the list since, I was interested, and well, unlike the last poll where I had to ask friends, wherein I asked friends eventually which ones they would prefer, which Christmas special they prefer to look at, this one did get not unanimously, but this one did get voted on, and so this year, we will be taking a look at Klaus. Is the film worthy of the admiration it gets? Is it worthy to be a Christmas special that you can view year after year? Or can it be easily overlooked and you wouldn't miss anything? Okay, that's not that. But let's at least talk about why I think it works. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about Klaus. Let's get to the long-ass plot summary. And again, fair warning, when it comes to films, the plot summaries tend to be a little long, so proceed with caution. But anyway, the main character for Klaus is, believe it or not Santa. No, the main character for this movie is actually a man by the name of Jesper Johansson, the son of the Postmaster General, who is actually pretty well off in life. Thanks to his dad's position as the Postmaster General, Jesper's life is just, well, he lives in the lap of luxury, essentially. His every whim is attended to, he pretty much just sleeps comfortably at night, and he's just, and he wants for nothing, as his every desire and need is met by either servants or someone else, and yada yada yada. Point is he's a rich kid with a trust fund, and he can just do whatever he wants. And of course, typically with children in that position, he's a spoiled, rotten brat. He doesn't want to do anything with his life, and is more than content to just live off of his dad's wealth until the day he dies. And sadly, his father is not okay with that. Well, sadly for Jesper, sadly for Jesper. And so as a result, his dad wound up enrolling him in the, hold on one second. Sorry about that. But yeah, his dad enrolled him in the Royal Postal Academy to, get Jesper in on the family business, teach him responsibility, make him get a job, allow him to make something of himself. Only problem is, Jesper's not for that. And so, basically, he weaponizes his incompetence and intentionally just does badly in all of his courses. Like moving fragile packages, sorting letters, doing carrier pigeon work. Basically, he just flubs it up, and in between classes, he just spends his time lounging in a tent getting coffee or frappuccinos or whatever. Point is, the dude is just banking on the fact that he'll eventually get kicked out of school, and he can just go right back to his spoiled, rich, rotten life. However, fate comes knocking on Jesper's door, as one day he receives a letter to see his father he receives a letter to see his father. And while he at first thinks that this is his father pretty much deciding, you know what, I've tried, but I need to pull you out of school, clearly my lesson didn't work, well, it turns out it's the opposite. Jesper's dad can see right through him, and he knows exactly what he's pulling. So, rather than, pulling him out of the school, He decides to graduate him immediately. Pretty much just tell him, you know what, I think you're ready, so I'm gonna make you a postman effective immediately. And to make sure that Jesper takes the job seriously, well, he gives him a bit of a challenge. Basically, Jesper, by the end of the year, has to deliver 6,000 letters. And if he doesn't deliver on those 6,000 letters, well, he'll get cut off. He can say goodbye to his lavish life of luxury, and he'll have to basically work for his own money. Something that Jasper is not exactly okay with. And to make matters worse, the place that he's positioned is not exactly a welcoming place for postmen, or anyone in general. And that place is, again, hold on one second. Sorry, was checking. But yeah, the place that he's being sent to is Smiresburg, and yeah, it's apparently the mere mention of Smearensburg is enough to cause everyone to freak out. Even a sergeant who is instructing Jesper thinks that maybe Jesper's dad might be going a little too far. Like, yeah, he thinks that Jesper needs discipline, but Smearensburg, he thinks, might be a little too much. But ultimately, Jesper's dad just kind of sticks to his guns and sends Jesper on his way, with Jesper himself kind of damning his dad the whole time, which is honestly very funny. Hold on one second, again. Sorry, that was dog-related stuff. But yeah, but yeah, basically Jesper's dad sends him on his way, and of course, his dad makes good on his promise, as the instant that Jesper is on his way and leaves the Postal Academy, well, the lavish coach that he thought he'd be traveling to Smearensburg on leaves him behind, and while they do give him a horse-drawn carriage, it's a lot smaller, and he has to do all the heavy lifting on it. And so, off Jesper goes, just sarcastically saying, "Thanks, Dad," the whole time, every time he encounters interference. Like when a wheel breaks down, he encounters harsh weather, or he just falls on his ass. Basically, it's clear that he doesn't want to do this, but like I said, Jesper's dad thinks this is the only way that Jesper can learn his lesson. But either way, Jesper does end up making his way to Smearensburg, or more specifically, the Smearensburg port, as Smearensburg is actually located on an island that's, well, cut off from civilization. And so the only way to get there is by traveling via a ferry, and the guy in charge of the ferry is a man by the name of Mogans, who from here on out, I'm probably just going to call him the ferryman because, well, they only mentioned his name, I think, like once in the entire movie, and after that, he's just kind of there. He's a character in the story, I will say that, but the dude's biggest contribution to this movie is being a wise ass, and I'll give him credit. He does the job well. Yeah, Mogans is clear, like, with the instant that Jesper meets Mogans at the port, it's clear that Mogans doesn't really enjoy his line of work. He does not he basically, because Smearensburg is supposed to be such a hellhole, nobody really goes out there, and so Mogans doesn't really have anything to look forward to in the day. And so, most of the people he talks to are just people asking for directions, and so, anytime someone is stupid enough to go to Smearensburg, he finds joy in messing with them, with Jesper being his latest victim, as he immediately realizes that Jesper has no idea what he's in for, and he's clearly looking forward to seeing it. But either way, he's still a ferryman, and he does his job well, as he does bring Jesper and his coach onto his boat, and they do travel out to Smearensburg. And I'll give credit where it's due. When Jesper arrives in Smearensburg, it's a very imposing sight, as the water surrounding the island is very foggy, so you can barely see what's going on. When they end up crossing what looks like a big rock fixture, they see what looks like a giant fish skeleton hanging from it, and when they get inside Smearensburg, it looks, well, as my mother put it, haunted. Like the denizens are like the Walking Dead. Basically, like the whole thing just feels like a ghost town, and any person that Jesper or Mogan see looks very creepy, unwelcoming, just kind of hunched over, just kind of scary looking with pale skin, or they're doing things that seem vaguely threatening. Like we see a bunch of kids with a snowman that they stabbed to death with carrots. We see a group of people carrying what looks like a big sack that drops a boot from it. Yeah, it might be a dead body. Point is, Point is, Smearensburg looks very unwelcoming, and it really does set a tone for just how unsettling this place is. Of course, Jesper wants to know what the deal is, and thinks, well, maybe, is there like a welcoming committee? I mean, I'm a new postman after all. And so Mogan says, oh yeah, there is, and he directs him to a bell in the center of town, telling them that all he has to do is ring that bell, and the welcoming committee will start up, and it'll be nice, there'll be a parade, a feast, yada yada yada. Point is, Jesper buys a hook, line, and sinker, and goes to ring the bell. That was very much the wrong decision, as immediately, once he rings the bell, everyone comes flying out of their houses, and the entirety of Smearensburg seems to erupt in a no-holds-barred brawl as everyone just starts trying to kill each other. Or more specifically, one half of the town is trying to kill the other. And as such, as Jesper is running through all this, with Mogens laughing at him the whole time, he eventually makes his way to the bell and accidentally rings it, which causes everyone in town to freeze up. Of course, this gets the attention of two older people, an old man and an old woman, who immediately start yelling at each other and think that the other person rang the bell and called it quits on the fight. That one of them clearly gave up before the other, and basically neither of them are buying it. That is until two of their kids, want a very big guy on the old lady's side and this very big girl on the man's side, let them know that the person who rung the bell was Jesper, and that he's the new. And ultimately, Jesper introduces himself to these two and says that he's the new postman. Something that gets everyone in town laughing, because the thing is, apparently, they don't really care for postmen. Like, why? Because, well, as you can kind of tell from the atmosphere, this is not a very welcoming place, and odds are the people in this town aren't exactly in a let's reach out and talk kind of mood. Put simply, no letters. They're not sending letters out to anybody, and so everyone just thinks it's hilarious that they're even trying to send out a postman. As such, with everyone realizing that it was Jesper who rung the bell to call it quits, so to speak, they ring the bell again, and once more the fighting resumes, as Jesper tries crawling out for dear life until he eventually makes his way to the school of Smearensburg, except it's more like a butcher shop, or a fish butcher shop. I don't know what the technical term is, I don't remember. Point is, it's full of dead fish, and the lady in charge of it, a woman by the name of Alva, well, she just wants to know what the hell Jesper's doing here. Put simply, Jesper wants to know what is going on, why is the town like this? And especially, which is also kind of which he's even further confused by the fact that he crawled into a school, and yet, like I said, it looks like a butcher shop in here. So what's the deal? As such, Alva explains exactly what the deal is with Smearensburg. Put simply, it's, as she puts it, the home of the world's greatest grudges. The whole town was established by two families, the Wellingboes and the Crumbs. And as we learn later in the movie, these two Ellingboes, not Wellingboes, Ellingboes and the Crumbs. And like I said, as we learn later in the movie, apparently these two families just hate each other. For what reason? Nobody knows. It's literally just that's their family histories. From the very first moment that men could walk, these two families just hated each other, and over the centuries they have dedicated their lives to trying to beat the other in every single form of competition, whether it be horseback riding, a fight, or even just messing with each other. Put simply, both families want to make it their mission to try and make the other's lives a living hell. And that's what Smearensburg was founded on. The entire town is made up of these two families, and so the residents of these families the residents of this town just, duke it out with the other side. Don't want to fraternize with the other people. And so that's basically just their whole culture. Literally, the only thing that both of these families can ever agree on is just how much they hate each other. And so, while they will have moments of civility every now and then, it's mostly in just the absurdity of people trying to butt into their affairs because, again, it's tradition. This is literally all these families know, and they wouldn't have it any other way. They love the fighting. They love trying to prove the other person is worse than them. They just like fighting, and they want to keep it ingrained in their histories, with the old man and old woman that we saw earlier being the official matriarch and being the official patriarchs of their respective families, with the old woman being of the Crumb side and the old guy being of the Ellingboe side. Put simply, which is ultimately why everything's kind of the way it is, and why a postman doesn't get a job here. Like I said, since everybody here clearly hates each other, of course they're not going to send out letters. Why send out letters to people you don't like? And of course, and on top of that, that's part of why the school is the way it is, because the parents of all these kids are so deeply ingrained in just hating the other family. They don't want their kids fraternizing with the enemy, and as a result, no kids ever go to school since, they had to go elbow to elbow with an Ellingbow or a Crumb or whatever. So, yeah, the school's a crap house, and while Alva took a job here, while Alva took a job in the school, bright-eyed and wanting to, brighten children's days and expand their minds and all that good teacher stuff, well, it was because she quickly realized that this was a dead-end job, and so she just wants to get the hell out of Dodge as quickly as possible. Hence why she converted the school into a fish butchery. She just basically sells fish to whoever wants any, and she just takes the money, and then pockets it into savings, hoping to build up a fund so she can eventually get out of here and get a job at a proper school. And as a result, all of her time in this town has essentially, holding on. Her time in Smearensburg, sorry, I forgot, I blanked on the name for a second, has essentially just made her very angry and bitter. And it's clear that whatever optimism she had when she came to Smearensburg died a very slow death. But ultimately, as Jesper is freaking out at her too, as she is very clearly being antagonistic to him, Mogans, believe it or not, kind of comes to his rescue as he manages to get him out of the school and bring him to his place of residence, which is of course the post office. And the post office is just as much of a crap hole in Smearensburg as everything else is, as the ceiling is falling apart, it's snowing everywhere, the slots where mail would be is essentially a chicken coop, and as we learn later, the outhouse is just like standing precariously on a piece of wood that you have to walk over a very loose plank just to get to. It's not fun. Very much not fun. And Jesper just does not like it one bit, and just wants to get out of here as quickly as possible. And so, while Mogans leaves him there, and even takes a few more quick jabs at him, well, Jesper, while not happy with this, does psych himself up, and does tell himself he has to do this, because if he doesn't do it, he'll be cut off. So, he tries putting his best foot forward, and while he's still clearly miserable here, he tries to make the best of a bad situation, and the next day he does try and, go out and collect mail. Again, though, it's kind of a dry... He's trying to get water from a dry well here. There's no mail in any mailboxes, and he can't seem to find anything anywhere. However, with this revelation, he tries to get creative, as while passing by this one big house, a kid that lives there ends up losing a drawing that flies out the window and lands in front of Jesper. And hoping to maybe, cheat the system a little, he tries to tell the kid to, mail... to try and, send out a letter, purchase a postage stamp, and Jesper can mail it back to him, Jesper can just keep the drawing, and basically, yeah, Jesper's just trying to be as sneaky as possible. Unfortunately, the sneakiness kind of ends up going over his head, ends up kind of coming back to bite him, as the kid's dad comes here, and, the kid's dad's a very creepy guy, as he wears an all-black suit with a top hat, and he carries a blunderbuss, and he has two vicious guard dogs on standby. And the instant this guy sees Jesper harassing his kid, he sicks the dogs on him, and Jesper just runs for his life, never returning the picture, and thus kind of keeping it. From there, days or weeks go by, and Jesper just is just not making any progress. No one is sending any letters, and it's quickly looking as though he is not going to actually do it. He's not going to actually do anything. He's not going to win anything, and it looks like he's going to be cut off. And while Mogans does pop in every once in a while to, mess with Jesper and collect mail, even doing some jabs about how he's going to need some help with the heavier bags, it's just clear that Jesper is miserable. However, fortune seems to shine on Jesper, as while he's just kind of hanging his head low at his desk and minding his own business, a wind flies in and ends up tussling a map of Smearensburg that's on his wall. and one corner of the map was folded over, but the wind starts to jostle it a little and allows him to see what's in the corner. And it turns out there is one more home in Smearensburg, or on the island of Smearensburg, that Jesper never knew about. The home of a lonely old woodsman. And so while Mogans encourages Jesper to go out there, that the woodsman loves company, which is a very clear indicator that Mogans is messing with him, Jesper is very much desperate, so he decides maybe this guy has some letters to send out, and so he goes to the woodsman's cabin. And again, like with the rest of Smearensburg, this place feels very intimidating as it's very darkly lit, it's covered in snow, and it does look like there's no light or warmth in here at all. And so when Jesper arrives, he tries knocking on the front door, but nobody answers. He tries wandering around until he eventually ends up in a woodshed. He eventually arrives at a woodshed, and he keeps just wondering, come on, hello, it's your friendly neighborhood postman, you got any letters to send out? And so, but again, there's no answer. As such, he ends up, as he wanders into the woodshed, he ends up going inside the woodshed, but thanks to a particularly strong wind, the door ends up closing behind him, and he ends up getting stuck in there as a bunch of icicles end up falling and block the door. We're essentially trapping Jesper inside. As such, Jesper tries figuring another way out, and as he wanders around, he does notice quite a few things about this woodsman's place, especially since that across all of his shelves, there are a bunch of toys, which does confuse Jesper, but eventually he just kind of brushes it aside as he does see a window of opportunity there. In this case, it's a literal window, and he believes that this will be able to help him get out of here. However, as he tries fidgeting with the window, he sees the very imposing figure of the woodsman walking by, and that puts the fear of God into Jesper and causes him to freak out and back into the toys. One of which is a carousel that has little toy soldiers that play music. And, well, he gets the music playing, which in turn gets the woodsman's attention, who, of course, wanders inside and sees what's going on, being strong enough to actually open the door and break the icicles blocking it. And so Jesper starts freaking out some more and tries sneaking away, and he manages to get out the door, but as he's kind of wandering around trying to find his way back to his sleigh, or back to his coach or whatever, well, that's when the woodsman comes up, and it's here where we meet the Santa of the story. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to Mr. Klaus, a big, burly ox of a man who, like most Santas, has a big beard and is very much got a lot of weight to him. Only difference is that while most Santas are holly and jolly and nice and sweet and welcoming, this guy looks like that all he has to do is look at you funny and you will drop dead. And the sight of him freaks Jesper out so much that he just screams, "I'm sorry," before just running away back to his coach and just bolting away from Klaus's land. Although, in his rush to get out, he ends up dropping a mailbag, which Klaus picks up and, well, since he's clearly not a socializer, he just chucks it away and hopes to get back to his wood chopping. However, as Klaus is going back to his home, a little wind picks up, and it turns out inside the mailbag that Jesper dropped was the drawing that the kid drew, and the wind seems to magically direct the picture right to Klaus. And the instant he sees it, he seems to be hit with a little bit of inspiration. And as such, when the film cuts back to Jesper as he's fleeing for his life, afraid of what's going to happen. Until as he's going down the road, Klaus appears right in front of him, and it causes him to skid to a halt and kind of fall flat on his face. As such, he just begs Klaus to he begs Klaus for forgiveness, says, "Please don't hurt me, don't chop me up into little bits, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again," yada yada yada. But Klaus eventually shows Jesper the picture he drew and says, "Do you know where this is?" And so Jesper, realizing that Klaus just wants directions, tries directing him to the house. But Klaus just thinks it'd be easier if he took Jesper there, so he just grabs Jesper, plops him right back into his coach, and Jesper kind of unwillingly brings him there himself. As such, they arrive at the kid's home, but they encounter a few problems. For starters, Klaus. Sorry, I'm skipping over stuff. But basically, the reason why Klaus wanted to come to this kid's house was because he had a present for him, and he wants Jesper to deliver it since, he's the mailman. Unfortunately, though, the package is a little too big to fit in this house's mailbox, and while Klaus says that Jesper should just go up to the house and drop it off, Well, that's a task easier said than done. As one, there's a gate barring the entrance, which is locked, and two, inside the house is a bevy of traps and other things that are meant to just keep intruders out, especially which also includes, of course, the guard dogs. However, as Jesper is freaking out about this, Klaus just makes the whole thing easy, as he's strong enough to bend the bars on the gate and just put Jesper inside. And while Jesper can't get away around all the traps, Klaus' solution for that as well. He just chucks him in through the chimney. And so Jesper doesn't end up making his way into the house, freaking out the whole time, but he does manage to drop off the present. Unfortunately, leaving the house is easier said than done, as the commotion he causes does end up waking up the house's owner, who once again grabs his blunderbuss ready to shoot the intruder. As such, Jesper barely manages to get out of the house because the front door is just covered in locks, and ultimately while Jesper does manage to get out, the owner of the house does try shooting him and ends up putting a hole in his front door. Thankfully, he ends up losing Jesper, as Klaus managed to get in. I don't know how. I guess he's a big fat ninja, and pulls him to the side out of view of the house's owner. And while the guard dogs try and go after Klaus too, again, big, burly, intimidating guy. He actually scares the dogs off. And so the owner runs off, thinking that the owner ends up following his dogs, thinking that they're going to lead him to the intruder. But as Klaus and Jesper are just kind of hiding, they end up being able to peek in through the window of the home, and they see the kid as he finds his present. And the kid unwraps it, and he finds that inside is a toy. Specifically, a wind-up frog toy that jumps around. And it's here that we finally see the first moment of warmth from Klaus, as the kid is just playing with this toy frog. We see Klaus just looking in, and while his facial expression doesn't really emote a lot, you can just see the a brightness in his eyes, and you can just see and while he doesn't smile, you can see that just looking at this kid enjoying himself it's bringing something alive inside him. And I love how the scene emphasizes this. The way that the way that the house is lit as the kid is just alone in there. It's clearly a dark place, but done well with visuals. You see that this frog is a brief bit of light, and it actually helps the kids work, and it actually makes the kids' world a lot nicer. And I love how they emphasize it with the music being grand and magical and just sweet, and the way the lightning goes up. I'm not doing it justice. I really am not. It's such a magical scene, and the way they use visual storytelling to show how this one little thing is such a nice bit of light in this kid's otherwise dreary life. It's sweet. However, Klaus is the only one kind of feeling that joy, as Jesper takes this opportunity to run like hell. However, as the kid is playing with the frog, he does peek a look in the window, and he does briefly see Klaus. And once Klaus realizes he's spotted, he once again uses his mad ninja skills and manages to slip away when the kid isn't looking. However, there is one little thing that Jesper left behind: the drawing the kid accidentally gave him. As such, Jesper manages to make it back to the post office, and he essentially just boards himself in because he's afraid of the big guy in the beards, and he doesn't want anything bad to happen to him, especially since the homeowner of the house they broke into has a blunderbuss and he does not like company. However, as the night turns into day, Jesper does get a knock on his door. While at first he thinks it's people that are trying to kill him, he finds that it's actually a group of kids who want to deliver letters. Specifically, they want Jesper to deliver letters to Klaus. As it turns out, the kid who got his frog toy basically just spread the word around, saying that if they send out a letter to Klaus, then they'll be able to get toys of their own. And so the kids now want to send off their own letters. And basically Jesper explained to the first kid how you could send a letter, that you have to pay a penny to get the postage and all that. So all the kids have envelopes ready and a penny so they can pay for postage. And as a result, Jesper starts seeing a real opportunity take place, and so he starts going to all of the kids of Smearensburg and begins telling them if they all write letters to Mr. Klaus, then they'll all be able to get toys of their own. And of course, being kids in a rather crappy town where all the adults hate each other, they all just jump at the opportunity as they all start writing letters to Klaus. That, of course, Jesper just takes happily. So, of course, things do seem to be going up for Jesper as one by one all the kids deliver letters, But Jesper quickly realizes that was just the easy part. The hard part is getting Klaus to agree at all, and the thing is, he's still very much freaked out by the guy. As such, he eventually manages to make it back to Klaus's cabin, wherein he finds Klaus outside in the woods chopping wood. And while Jesper tries, asking him, "Hey, remember me? It's Jesper. Listen, I have something I want to ask you about. Kids want to get toys." He's still very much freaked out by the big guy with the axe, and ultimately he gets freaked out, made even worse by the fact that Klaus hands him a rope that looks like it's a hanging rope, but ultimately he just gave it to Jesper to hold on to. The real thing that it's hanging is a birdhouse, and it turns out that that's kind of what Klaus has been doing with his time. He makes birdhouses, as the entire forest is filled with them. And again, visual storytelling is great in this scene. As when Jasper sees Klaus alone in the woods, it's just as dark and dreary as it was when Jesper first arrived at Klaus's cabin. But once we see that he was really making birdhouses and just how abundant they are, the scene starts lighting up as the sun starts rising over the hill, showcasing that while on the outside Klaus has a very dark and dreary exterior, on the inside there is clearly a warmth and compassion. It's clearly buried a little, but it is there, and I like that. Either way, Jesper does just ask Klaus outright if he wants to donate toys to give to these kids, but Klaus is just not interested. Basically, the whole thing with that one kid last night was a one-time thing. He doesn't plan to do it again. And so, while Jesper continues trying to convince him, since, he's got a whole cabin full of toys back there, he could donate some, right? Basically, he starts even pulling out kids' letters and listing them, but as Klaus walks away, the wind from before, the one that brought him that one kid's drawing, immediately picks up, and it seems to center on Jesper. Now, Jesper himself doesn't notice this as he's too busy reading off letters, but the wind just starts circling around him, the light emphasizing things even better, and Klaus sees it very easily. And, well, it convinces Klaus. And while Jesper does try and look what Klaus is seeing, the wind does die down. So yeah, from Jesper's perspective, Klaus is just kind of looking at him weirdly. So whatever. But it's enough to convince Klaus, and so he tells Jesper that he will donate the toys, but they're gonna have to do it like they did before, under cover of night, and Jesper still has to deliver them. So yeah, Jesper got what he wanted, but he can't convince Klaus to do anything to try and, change up the plans a little. But ultimately, from there, what happens next in the movie is just, the deliveries going on. As days go by, as the days go on, Jesper and Klaus do begin visiting each of the towns one by one, and, just learning about all this, just, seeing all the, just delivering all the toys. Of course, the task of delivering all these toys is easier said than done, because like the first house, all of them have security. And so, like with the first house, Jesper has to go in through the chimney every time, and, well, again, going through the chimney is easier said than done, as it's a fucking chimney. Can you name a single person who can effortlessly climb a house and go down a chimney? It's impossible. But he does manage to deliver the toys despite much hardship and hijinks, and so bit by bit he is delivering it. And basically he and Klaus are making the kids' dreams come true. Albeit Jesper is not exactly happy with this, but again, it's helping him in the long run, so he just keeps going with it. In the meantime, though, with Smearensburg during the day, it turns out that the toys that Jesper and Klaus are delivering are starting to cause a little bit of changes. For example, the kid who got the toy for the wind-up frog is happily playing with them in his front yard, but the thing is, his dad has put like a big fence that basically separates his house from the other family's house, and his dad's supposed to be an Ellingbo, and the neighbors are Crumbs. However, there's a little hole in the fence, and as the kid is playing with his frog, well, the frog ends up going to the other side of the fence, and we see a little girl on the Crumb side see it. And while both are clearly in shock about this, immediately they both just kind of put that aside as they both continually start playing with the frog. Something that their parents aren't exactly okay with, as when the little boy's dad and the little girl's mom see what's going on, they're just mortified that their children would associate with those other people. And so they take him away to talk with the elders again, who explain the whole history with the Ellingbos and the Crumbs. And so ultimately, So ultimately, they kind of it helps emphasize just how bad this town is and just how deep-seated this hatred runs throughout their history. But ultimately, while they do learn where these kids have been getting the toys, again, it's just a little thing and they don't really do anything about it. However, the little by little things do start kind of picking up as more and more kids want more presents as they keep delivering letters and so on and so forth. And as things go along, it turns out the word of what Jesper and Klaus are doing has spread even further beyond Smearmsburg, since as kids are delivering letters, there's a little Sami girl that comes up wanting to, get her own present. Unfortunately, she doesn't speak English, so she can't really write a letter. And since, Jesper kind of wants a since Jesper's doing this whole thing to, build up his count for letters, he's not willing to listen to her at all, so he just kind of shoos her off. On top of that, some of the kids can't actually write to save their lives, since, nobody goes to school here. As such, Jesper says that if they really want to learn how to write, if they really want to learn how to write, then he knows a place that they can go. And so, he directs them to Alva's school. And ultimately, Alva's still very much dead on the inside, and while she sees these kids here wanting to learn, it doesn't really reignite that spark yet. And as such, while she doesn't tell the kids to piss off, she's also not happy to see them there. And so, in the beginning, she just kind of treats them as an audience to her fishmongering work. Fishmonger! That's the word! God dang it, I can't believe I forgot that. But yeah, eventually she does kind of cave in, and she does start teaching the kids, at least with the promise that if she teaches them one thing, then they'll leave her alone. As such, she does teach the kids how to each write their own names, and the kids are actually astonished by this and also want to learn how to read and write. And ultimately, their excitement at being taught these things, it starts bringing a little light back to Alva. And so, as the kids are talking about wanting to learn, one of the things that's brought up is how they don't have textbooks or writing implements or so forth, to practice writing. And so Alva realizes that if she really wants to teach these kids, she's gonna need some new material. And so, she decides to dip into the savings a bit. In the meantime, back in Smearmsburg, we see that basically Jesper and Klaus' activities are even causing more commotion as well, as the kids begin whispering about everything Klaus has done, which, of course, are all things that Jesper has done. And from a comical point of view, I love how everything that they're talking about are all things commonly associated with the Santa mythos. Specifically, how he can slip down through chimneys, how he likes sweets, how if you leave your socks hanging over the fireplace, he'll leave toys in them. How he appears and disappears without anybody ever seeing him, and so on and so forth. And even one kid who was basically just a big jerk to Jesper when he first arrived in town ends up complaining that he didn't get a toy even though he wrote a letter. And well, the reason why Jesper didn't do it was because, again, kid was a dick, so he gave him coal instead. And so when the kid asks why the hell he didn't do all that, why he didn't get a toy, Jesper says that Klaus sees you, he knows everything about you, and if he thinks you've been bad, he has you on the naughty list, so if you want to get a toy, you need to be nice. Which the kids end up taking to heart as they start being nice to everybody. And again, I'm kind of going back to the whole Santa thing. I also again, going back to the comical point of view, because I don't want to get too far from my original point. Basically, all the things that they associate with Santa, chimney, cookies, and so forth, they're just things that Jesper did in all of his suffering. Again, we already know where the chimney thing came from, and Jasper's slim enough to fit down the chimneys. But in the case of cookies, he just literally, it's the reason why the cookies are associated with Klaus is because while Jasper was walking around, he took some cookies because why not? He put things in his socks because he put toys in socks because, well, one particular house was full of sleeping guard animals who he didn't want to provoke, so he just dropped the toys in the sock and went back up. And again, like I said, coal because kid was a jerk to him. Either way, going back to the nice kids list, the kids around town actually start cleaning up their acts and stop being mean to each other because their parents told them to. In fact, they start helping their neighbors. Like, for example, the father of the kid who got the wind-up frog wound up breaking his leg when he tried fixing his fence, and as a result, kids that are both Ellingbo and Crumb kids wound up bringing him back to his home and tended for him. And while he was complaining the whole time because he didn't want to be he did not want to be involved with Ellingbows and so forth, well, he ultimately, he did accept the help as they made soup for him and he took it. And yeah, while he was clearly being grumpy the whole time, he clearly did appreciate it. And what makes it even better, and even using another example, the kids also would sporadically end up stealing cherries from this one lady's yard. However, this time around, rather than stealing the cherries, they picked them all for her and put them in a basket and put them on her front step. Of course, this lady was, I think, an Ellingbow, and so just to be kind of angry, she crushed the berries up and put them in a jam and gave it to the crumb mother of these kids, and then just to be even more spiteful, she put that jam on a cake. These are a lot less hateful than they think they are, but the point is, it's clear that the good deeds these kids are doing are having a domino effect on the parents, as little by little, the parents of the Crumbs and the Ellingbows start kind of putting aside their differences as the more their kids start associating with one another and becoming friends, the more the parents start kind of tolerating one another and become friends themselves. Going back to the kid who got the toy frog, he ends up eventually tearing down his fence, and he uses the spare wood to, build a play set for both his kid and the neighbor's kids to play on. One kid ends up cleaning up his dad's clarinet, which he plays wonderfully, and they all start being nice to one another, and they actually start they start building up bridges, helping each other. Just basically everyone starts being nice to each other. Going back to the two ladies who were giving hate gifts to one another. The lady who got the single slice of cake with the cherry jam on top ends up going back to the other lady's house with a full cake of the cherry jam, and the other lady just happily invites her in. It's a little domino effect of just niceties going on, and little by little, people's lives are even getting better. We even check back in with Alva, and we see that even she's starting to feel the cheer as the kids are being nice to her as well, and it's actually really nice. You can see that light is little by little returning to Smearmsburg. Unfortunately, the elders of Smearmsburg aren't exactly happy to see this, since, like I said, the whole town was built on this hate. So they decide that the best course of action is to, get rid of the people who are bringing all this unnecessary joy to town. And so the old lady and the old guy, separately, both decide to try and plan an ambush on Jesper and Klaus as they're going to go out and deliver presents. Which we end up seeing... Which basically, as that's going along, it ends up going wrong, as both of their ambush attempts end up interfering with one another, and Klaus and Jesper kind of have to fight for dear life. Thankfully, it's actually before this when another staple of the Santa mythos came about, the reindeer. And again, I like how creatively they work it in with the movie, as basically the reason why they got the reindeer is because as the demand for toys continued piling up, so too did the toys themselves, and as a result, Jesper's little coach was not big enough to support all that extra weight. And while Klaus initially thought, well, maybe we'll just do a smaller load of toys, Jesper decided that they needed to get better pulley systems. Since he just had the one horse, maybe they could get something stronger to pull him along. And so he sees a herd of reindeer and decides, hey, they can pull the sleigh. Or they can pull the coach, which again is easier said than done, as Jesper tries desperately to get all the reindeer, which don't follow, and Klaus, who just sat back and watched, eventually decides to intervene as he managed to get the reindeer over with reindeer food. And so ultimately, that's when so they have their reindeer, which in this case is 7, not 8, but whatever. But again, that's when the whole ambush thing goes along, and the reindeer end up freaking out and end up causing Klaus and Jesper to just go all over the road, and as a result, the coach ends up getting messed up a bit, and little by little, they end up just kind of and as such, they end up accidentally flying right off of a cliff, But with the way they're doing it, it looks as though the reindeer are magically pulling along the coach, and it looks like a sleigh. Something that one particular kid sees and thinks, oh my god, that's Klaus! Although what he doesn't see is them eventually crashing down, and both Jesper and Klaus kind of freaking out over the fact that they almost died. It's actually amazing. Which, actually, kind of going back to that, with this scene also showcases Klaus and Jesper kind of getting closer to one another. As Jesper is telling Klaus about how all the kids in the neighborhood are being nice to one another, how seems to be spreading to the parents, that all of them are acting good and nice and all that good stuff. And Klaus mentions how what this is that, well, I'm not going to quote this line verbatim, but what he says is that a true act of goodness will cause another. Basically, if you do good in the world, that will in turn cause more good, which is what caused the domino effect. The kids are acting nice to one another, and in turn, it's what caused the parents to start being nice to each other, and it's basically just breaking down walls, bringing everyone closer. Of course, Jesper thinks this ideology is a little dumb, because like I said, he's still a spoiled, rotten brat, and he doesn't give a shit about anyone, and the whole reason he's still doing all this is because he still needs to get his letter count up. And as such, he just talks about how everyone's in it for themselves, and everybody has a reason for doing anything. And with Jesper noting that the kids are only acting nice because they want toys, and the parents, well, he hasn't figured them out yet, but they're clearly in it for something, which does cause Klaus to wonder what Jesper is getting out of all this. But that's when the ambush happens, so whatever. But either way, going back to the whole crash fly, magic reindeer, and then eventually landing. The next day, as Jesper continues getting letters from kids, the one kid who saw them flying through the sky comes in and tells everyone that they won't believe what he just saw. And so, of course, Jesper relays this story back to Klaus, and even Klaus finds it hilarious, and which also what I like is that we see that Klaus is repairing the damage to the coach, and it's now more or less kind of like a little sled. And yeah, like I said, he finds the whole story hilarious, and he starts laughing, which is of course the ho 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 that we associate with old Saint Nick, which I love. What I love is that well, Jesper thinks this is amazing. This is great. He thinks he even starts kind of poking fun at Klaus, and it's clear that Jesper and Klaus are starting to build up a stronger rapport and are becoming friends. As Jesper, when they first met, would not have joked around like this, but now we see him just intentionally poking the bear a little, just because, well, that's what friends do. They rib each other. But ultimately, as their friendship seems to get stronger, well, it's becoming clear that the supply of toys is not going to be able to meet up with the demand, as Klaus is slowly running out, and he even says that once they're gone, they're gone. He doesn't plan to make any more, and once they're done, he and Jesper won't have to do these late-night runs anymore, which Klaus thinks that Jesper might be looking forward to, but Jesper's still freaking out because if they go down, then he's not going to be able to meet his quota by the end of the year. So he has absolutely no idea what the heck is going to happen now. As such, after another night of delivering toys, he goes back to the post office and wonders what the heck he's going to do from here. But that's when the little Sami girl is there and meeting with Jesper. And Jesper, well, he does keep trying to shoo her away. But, well, he does need to vent to someone, so he just kind of unloads it all on the Sami girl, talking about how he can't meet his quota, and he can't meet his quota because there aren't any toys, and he has no idea how to get that back up anymore. And basically, while he considers the whole, why not just stay in this town and live with a bunch of crazy people who want to kill me, he kind of gets more into his character, and we do see more of what he has at stake here, as, again, the whole pampered lifestyle he lived, that's all he's used to. He's used to being a somebody, and he thinks that if he'll be alone in this town, then he might be a nobody. And as a result, he's afraid of losing all that. The sense of importance that comes from his position. As such, he's just, which, again, it's a nice way of showcasing how his character is still at this point in the movie, character-wise, but we do see that little by little but ultimately, as he's mulling this over, he gets a spark of inspiration, because you see, the film has been jumping ahead very seamlessly. He does think that there is a good idea in mind. He does believe that there might be a way to, get a bunch of presents made and finally meet his quota? And the answer to that is Christmas, of course. After all, children want toys around Christmas, so why not get Klaus to make more toys for Christmas? As such, after thanking the little Sami girl for helping him before he tells her to get off his property because she's technically trespassing, he immediately starts brainstorming this whole big plan for Christmas. And so the next day, as Klaus is once again chopping wood, he once more gets the calling, so to speak, which is basically that wind that seems to direct him to where he needs to be, and it directs him to his shed, where once he goes inside, he sees a veil up as he sees what he thinks is a woman there making something, until this woman pulls it aside and it's revealed that it's Jesper, which does disappoint Klaus a little, but, well, Jesper says that he's got a surprise for him, and it turns out he's completely refurbished his work shed into, well, a workshop where he can make more toys. Of course, Klaus is not exactly happy with all this, as he doesn't want to make any more toys. He's just stopped with all that stuff, but Jesper keeps trying to sell it on him. He has cards, he's got a pitch meeting, basically, and even starts showing him all the areas of the workshop that he can do, where he can do wood carving with cogs, all that nice stuff, and he even talks about how he can, like, refurbish one little section into where he can keep all his tools. And this one little section of his workshop is covered by a drape, and basically this causes Klaus to freak out as once he tries pulling it aside, Jasper tries pulling it aside, and we soon see what's behind said curtain. It's a little wood carving. With that basically is like it just carved into a small tree. At the top are these two little wooden figures, one looking like Klaus and one of a woman, while underneath it are rows and rows and rows of empty holes, which, once Jasper sees this, he starts realizing that this was probably something personal to Mr. Klaus, and when he looks at Klaus, he just sees him, like, just looking angry and scared, and Jesper immediately just kind of goes quiet as he's like, Klaus, I am so sorry, I didn't mean for this. But at this point, any goodwill is kind of gone, as Klaus tells Jesper to get out. As such, Jesper does leave, but he's starting to feel a mite guilty about what he just did. Because while Jesper won't openly admit it at this point, he and Klaus are friends, and he did grow closer to him. So knowing that he kind of pushed the limit a bit and kind of crossed the line that Klaus didn't want him to cross, it's getting to him a lot. And so as he gets back to his post office, he once more sees the little Sami girl there, and, well, he continues unloading on her and talks about how guilty he feels about what he did, how he kind of pushed it. He doesn't know what to do, but as he continues talking with the Sami girl, he starts realizing that he does like talking to her, and so kind of as a bit of a thank you, so to speak, he decides, okay, you know what, maybe I will help. You know what, you deserve something. You do deserve something. Come with me. And as such, he takes the Sami girl to Alva's house, and basically, he asks Alva if she can understand the Sami girl. And Alva does invite them in and offers assistance. And again, we get a really beautiful scene here, as we get a song, which the name of the song escapes me. I think it's Invincible. It might be called Invincible, but don't quote me on that. But it's a very nice and warm song, and it's basically plays over the scene as Jesper and Alva work together to try and decode what this little Sami girl is saying, little by little translating it into parchment and learning what she's saying. Nice, and like with the scene with the kid getting the toy frog, the lighting on here is just so warm and sweet, and just the expressions of fun that all three characters are having as they're just spending all this time talking with each other, joking, figuring out what this little girl is saying. And eventually, they do learn what she wants. And they end up even learning her name. Her name is Margu, I think. Hold on, let me confirm. Yep, it was Margu. But, yeah, they eventually do figure out what Margu wanted is essentially a bobsled. And so Jesper, realizing that he can't exactly talk to Klaus right now, especially since Klaus doesn't seem to want to make toys, well, he decides that despite the fact that he's not going to get anything from this, to make Margu a bobsled himself, which is just not exactly something that he's used to doing, but he tries putting his best foot forward. In the meantime, back with Klaus, we see that that essentially what Jesper did kind of get to him a little, as he's sitting in his shed, just kind of moaning and self-pitying. But as he does look at the little shrine that he had, he does kind of start thinking things over, and he comes to his own revelation. As such, he makes his way into Smearumsburg and gets to the post office, where he sees Jesper passed out on the floor as he's in the middle of making a sled. And so, he decides to lend him a hand. With Jesper waking up, finding him, just kind of shaving off wood, and Jesper is happy to see him and happily joins him, though when Jesper tries to apologize, Klaus just kind of shuts up and just tells him to keep working. As such, the pair of them do eventually make the bobsled, and they end up going out to the Sami village that Margu calls home, which is, of course, off coast a little, but they do manage to get there, and they do manage to drop off the present. Both of them, of course, doing the usual stick. Them trying to go under the cover of darkness, leaving it out when making sure no one sees them, and ultimately, when the sun does come up, they're hiding over a hill, and, well, they happily see Margu come out of her tent, see her bobsled, and just cheering with joy as she got her present. And so again, the scene just erupts in greatness as the music just gets louder, and we see Margu just filled with so much happiness and joy as she weaves around in the snow with her parents watching. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And when Klaus and Jesper go back to Klaus's house, Jesper himself is kind of feeling a high as well, with Klaus even kind of smiling at him and talking about how, yeah, you felt it, didn't you? And while you felt it too, the joy seeing her happy. And while Jesper tries to deny it, Klaus says it's okay. I tried denying it at first too. And so Klaus goes on to explain his own backstory, and it turns out, yeah, if you could probably tell based on context clues, Klaus used to have a wife, specifically a woman by the name of Lydia. And of course, as you do, Klaus and Lydia were as happy could be. And the reason why Klaus and the land that they live on right now is a land that Klaus specifically got for him and Lydia, just away from everything, where they could just, have a life together. And the thing is, Klaus and Lydia wanted a bunch of kids, and they were happy to have a family. It's part of the reason why Klaus had that little shrine before, as that was supposed to be a shrine meant to have little figurines for not just him and Lydia, but also all their kids. And so for years they tried having children. And as time went along, that's where all the toys came from, as Klaus happily made them for the kids that he was hoping to one day have. Unfortunately, no children came. And so while Klaus and Lydia never gave up, it was becoming increasingly clear that they might not have kids. But Klaus still never stopped making the toys. But one day, though, it was too late. Lydia soon got sick, and, well, the rest is history. And it's from there why Klaus kind of brushed himself off, as when Lydia died, essentially that spark kind of died with her, and he just kind of kept to his lonesome. And part of the reason why he made the birdhouses was because Lydia loved birds, and so he figures that making those birdhouses would be something that she'd want him to do. However, Klaus admits that his time with Jesper has kind of helped reignite that spark in him, and he even starts thinking that all this goodwill they're doing, making these toys, giving them to children, seeing them happy, it's what Lydia would have wanted Klaus to do. And so he decides, why don't we do that Christmas thing you mentioned? And so he just gets all on board. He just jumps in head first, and he's like, yeah, we'll get all those toys, and we'll deliver them on Christmas, and with a whole year of planning, we can expand it to more towns next year. And basically, it's just, he's clearly going all in and ready to do this. But Jesper, once he hears the whole year of planning next year thing, he starts getting a little nervous, because again, he thinks he might be gone by next year. As such, he really has no idea what to do, and just kind of and doesn't really know how to break it to Klaus. But as he's going along, he happens to walk by the schoolhouse, and he sees Alva in there happily teaching the kids. She's got that lust for life back. She's dressed properly now. She's not a fishmonger anymore. She's actually a proper teacher, and she's clearly having joy in teaching these kids. And so once school wraps up for the day and all the kids start heading out, Jesper's like, what the hell? What happened here? Because yeah, the schoolhouse is now completely cleaned up. Everything that had to do with fishmongering has been moved out, and school supplies have been moved in. So he's wondering how the hell did Alva get all this stuff? And Alva admits she dipped into her savings and she kind of used it all up. Of course, Jesper's like, but what happened to wanting to leave this place? Didn't you say you wanted to go? And Alva's like, well, who would want to leave this place right now? Of course, this causes Jesper to be a little confused, but Alva decides to show him exactly what his good deeds have done, and she brings him out to the town square, and it's looking a lot warmer and cheerier than it was when Jesper first arrived, as everyone is out and about, socializing, having fun, putting up decorations for Christmas. We see people singing and caroling. We see them decorating that giant-ass fish that Jesper saw on his way in and making it look like a Christmas tree. We see the grumpy neighbor whose son got the toy frog happily walking about with his neighbors and wishing Jesper a Merry Christmas. We see everyone just having fun and enjoying each other's presence. And Jesper starts realizing this is a very much a nice place now. And it all started with him. And and ultimately, as things go along and Jesper and Klaus decide to continue their whole operation to, get Christmas going again, well, they end up getting a little help. As it turns out, Margu was able to talk to the rest of the people in her village, and they came by Klaus's place to give Jesper and Klaus a hand as they come in and start helping them build the toys, essentially making a whole little operation in there and just streamlining the whole process. And it's here when Jesper realizes he kind of likes it here now. The people are now a lot warmer. He has friends here that he wouldn't trade for the world. And yeah, it's clear that he and Alva are starting to develop feelings for one another as he likes spending time with her. And he begins wondering, do I even want to go back? Do I want to stay here with all these crazy people and weirdos? Well, sadly, things don't exactly go well for Jesper, because, as I mentioned, the elders of Smearmsburg are not happy that everyone's getting along. And so, ultimately, the old lady Crumb and old man Ellingbo end up having a secret meeting in the middle of town near the bell, and they pretty much just said, everyone's getting along right now, and this is not what we built this town on. We built it on hate and resentment are how it's going to stay. And as such, reluctantly, the elders of the Crumb and Ellingbo clans decide to form a temporary truce, pretty much having them both come together so that they can eventually go back to killing each other. And so they decide that if they want to get rid of all this goodwill and good cheer, then they need to get rid of Jesper and Klaus, and they end up eventually finding a means to do that. And as the thing is, something I haven't mentioned is that Jesper kind of kept track of all the letters that he was sending via a graph that he chalked onto one of his walls, that every time he sent letters, he added more and more to the graph. And ultimately, it turns out, as old man Ellingbo and old lady Crumb go to the post office, they see his graph and they think, I think the postman could use a little bit of help. And as such, using their immediate family, they end up starting to send out more and more letters and actually start making up the difference for Jesper, essentially sending out 1,400 letters in one night, which, does actually end up meeting his quota. And so, the next day, as Jesper is happily at Klaus's workshop, making toys with Alva, the Sami people, and Klaus, well, things kind of go a little wrong, as they get a knock on the door, and when Jesper goes to answer it, he finds his father, which confuses Jesper as he wonders why the hell his father is here, but his father wants to tell Jesper how proud he is of him for reaching his goal. As Jesper, realizing what he's talking about, wants to take the conversation outside, even closing the door, which confuses everyone in the workshop, But Jesper wants to know what he's talking about, and yeah, that's when Jesper learns that someone sent out a bunch of letters under his nose. And sure enough, that's when Old Man Ellingbo and Old Lady Crumb come up and tell Jesper that they wanted to congratulate him personally, that they're the ones who told his daddy about his astounding accomplishment, and they wanted to see him off and congratulate him for a job well done. And sure enough, that's also why Jesper's dad is here, as well. Jesper kept up his end of the bargain, so his dad is ready to, bring him back home, return him back to his lavish life, and, just say goodbye to Smearmsburg, which Jesper isn't exactly okay with, because after all, he's already gotten to the point where maybe he kind of likes living in Smearmsburg now. But, well, unfortunately, all this dirty laundry got aired in front of the entire workshop, as everyone stepped outside to see what was going on, and they heard everything. And so, yeah, everyone's able to put all the pieces together and realize that Jesper did all this to meet his quota, just so he could get out of Smearmsburg, which, yeah, makes everyone not exactly happy with Jesper, as the Sami people go back inside, and while Margu is clearly heartbroken and still wants to believe in the best part of Jesper, well, even Alva just kind of starts looking at him with disdain before going back inside. And ultimately the only people left outside are Jesper, his dad, and the elders of Smearmsburg. And while Jesper tries pleading with Klaus, telling him, yeah, it started out selfishly, but things have changed, ultimately Klaus shows his own disdain for the guy now, as he just repeats the line of everyone's out for themselves, and as he goes back inside too. So yeah, every single connection that Jesper built up in Smearmsburg has just been torpedoed. And as such, with nothing really left to tie him to Smearmsburg anymore, he gets into his dad's coach and they go away. As such, the elders of Smearmsburg pat themselves on the back as they've successfully gotten one man out of the picture. Now all that's left is to take care of Klaus. In the meantime, as Jesper and his dad go out to the docks and are heading out, Jesper's dad's just congratulating him, going, "Oh, this is so great for you! I'm so proud of you. We can set you up in a really great place." Of course, they want a postmaster who was able to get all this stuff in Smearmsburg and blah blah blah. It's clear Jasper's not listening to a word, as he just looks miserable. And I'll even give credit to Mogans in this scene, and I'm not calling him the ferryman, whatever. But either way, Mogans actually, as Jesper is leaving, Mogans is about to kind of pour some salt on his wound about how he's so happy to leave, but when he realizes how miserable Jesper is, he bites his tongue as he realizes, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't the right time to do that. And so, as Jesper just kind of takes a seat on the ferry, well, Mogans decides to find a new target, as he sees Jesper's dad. It's like, wow, I've never seen someone look sadder leaving Smearmsburg than coming. Oh well, I'm sure it's not anything. Certainly not something that will grow into resentment and bitterness. Again, I love that. It's great, but it actually does the job well, as, yeah, even Jesper's dad realizes that something's troubling his son. As she sits Jesper down and asks him what's happening, and, well, we don't actually see this, but Jesper does come clean with his dad about everything he did in Smearmsburg, about everything he's built up, and how he doesn't want to leave it all behind. He wants to stay. And, well, his dad's actually proud of him, and even gives him a hug. Again, we don't see this, it's explained by Jesper later, but Jesper's dad is fully understanding of what his son wants, and thus he does encourage his son to stay in Smearmsburg, which Jesper does. As such, his dad happily leaves on the ferry, and while Margu comes in and is just sad that she thinks Jesper is gone, well, immediately her light returns as she sees Jesper on the dock. And so they get to talking, and Jesper tells her everything that happened. And, well, while he's definitely going to miss the lap of luxury life, he still has things in Smearmsburg that he loves and he doesn't want to leave behind. Although he's also aware that getting those things back is going to be a lot of hard work, especially since, well, staying in Smearmsburg won't take any effort. It's winning over the hearts of the people he betrayed that's going to be harder. However, he seems to get an opportunity to do so, as he looks up to the hills, he sees the light of several torches and pitchforks going about, as he quickly realizes that the elders of Smearmsburg are probably gunning for Klaus. But in the meantime, we cut back to Klaus's house, and we see that he's actually gotten fully decked out. And yeah, I kind of skipped over some stuff as we saw the Sami people, helping out Klaus and Jesper in their plan. And part of how they helped him was that they actually gave Klaus and Jesper a new sled that looks like the more traditional, what you would expect from a more traditional Santa sled. They even carved Klaus's and Jesper's name into it, and they even gave Klaus a new outfit. And this one is not what you would expect from a traditional Santa costume, but it does have the same elements. It's big, it's jolly, it looks like a snowsuit, it's red, but it does clearly incorporate some more Sami elements into it, and I admit, I dig it. It's cool. But either way, we see basically Klaus, Alva, and the Sami people loading up a bunch of gifts onto his onto his new sleigh, looking like he's getting ready to head out and deliver them all. But once everything's loaded up, that's when old man Ellingbo and old lady Crumb, plus their immediate families, come up. And, well, they make it clear they want to destroy the toys. And as such, while everyone looks angry to see them, Klaus just tells them they can do whatever they want to the toys, just don't hurt anyone. And so the elders say that's fine with us, and so they sick their two biggest family members on them. Basically, this big girl this big girl who is an Ellingbo, and this big guy who's a Crumb. Basically, they all just. Basically, they're getting ready to charge at the bag of toys until Jesper comes out and just he runs off this hill and then jumps right onto the bag of toys, knocking it into the sleigh. At which point, and Klaus is already in the sleigh, and Jesper jumps in beside him, and he thinks that he's getting ready to run off so they won't get the toys. But as he yas the reins for the reindeer, he finds that they're not even attached, and instead, he actually did enough force that he caused the sleigh to start sliding away in the opposite direction. It's actually kind of funny. But ultimately, the way this looks, it's clear that the toys are getting away, and so old man Crumb and old lady Crumb and old man Ellingbo tell their family to go and get them, which leads to this big high-flying chase sequence as they all are chasing after this, as both members of both of these families are chasing after the sleigh to get to the toys. And what I love is that throughout this whole chase scene, Jesper is just so desperately trying to keep the toys safe, but Klaus is still clearly holding on to some resentment. As he said, as Jesper at one point is trying to get everything together, he says, Klaus, I could use your help. It's like, use a very interesting choice of words. It's, again, I love it. You can just tell there's still venom there, and it's actually really funny, and it makes sense, but it's also hilarious. But ultimately, they continue slipping and sliding across these caverns through these icicles, and while Klaus does offer some minimal assistance, he's not really doing anything, just sitting in his seat and crossing his arms looking angry. But as they continue going through this chase, the two big members of the Ellingbos and the Crumbs try dive bombing the sleigh, but Jasper manages to get it out of the way, and it causes them both to kind of slip and slide until they're at a cliff, with the big girl Ellingbo almost falling off, but the big boy of the Crumb side manages to catch her. Which, yeah, that causes a moment, but we'll get back to. But eventually, as things go along, they start kind of losing their traction. Eventually, Jesper starts losing the traction on the sleigh, and they end up almost hitting a ledge, which they both end up falling off of. At which point, as they both are thrown out of the sleigh keeps gets closer to the edge, and Jesper freaks out as he tries running the toys. And yeah, Klaus, seeing Jesper doing all this, immediately is like, "Wait, no, Jesper, it's not worth it. Don't do it." But Jesper grabs the sled and manages to get enough traction in the snow to keep the sled from falling off and going into the ravine below. So, it looks like the day is saved. They got all the toys. That should be fine. Until old lady Crumb appears on a higher ledge and rips open the bag, causing the toys to fall out before the bag just falls off the cliff entirely. So, yeah, overall it looks like a failure. Which, yeah, this devastates Jesper something fierce. And so, as old lady Crumb and old man Ellingbo are patting themselves on the back for a job well done, even saying that that come next morning, the truce will be off and they'll go back to killing each other, well, Jesper starts repeating the phrase that Klaus told him about how one true act of kindness will create another. Which at first the elders are like, "What the hell are you talking about? I think you might have hit your head. You might need to take some rest." But ultimately, Jesper just throws it back in their faces as he says, "If you don't believe me, then turn around." And as such, confused, the elders of the Ellingbo and Crumb families look around, as they see the big girl of the Ellingbow family just carrying around the big guy of the Crumb family, proclaiming that he's hers. And so as the elders say, "Oh, no, no, what are you doing? Get away from that person!" Immediately she just runs away. She's not willing to let this guy go, and they run off with the rest of the families chasing after them. So, yeah, everything they kind of were working towards has kind of gone downhill. Much like the toys. But yeah, as Jesper's kind of lamenting the loss of the toys, well, that's when he learns something. They weren't really toys. As one of the few presents that didn't get to go over the cliff is presented to Jesper, and when he opens it up, it's a log of wood. He's confused by this until he looks over up on top of the hill, and we see another sled coming up, filled with another bag of toys. Yeah, it turns out that everyone knew what the elders of Smearmsburg were planning to do. Why? Because they openly talked about it in front of their kids. And of course, kids start talking about it, and since kids go to school, the teacher hears about it, and she just passed the message along to Klaus and the Klaus, and so Alva and the Sami people were able to set up this fake ruse while getting the real toys set up in the background. So yeah, this is all a big scam. Of course, the only one that wasn't in on it was Jesper, as he was aware, as they had already shunned him by the time they had set this whole plan in motion. But yeah, while Jesper made things more complicated, things still went off without a hitch. And while at first Jesper thinks that whole chase scene was for nothing, now he is assured that it was for something. It proved to everyone that Jesper really does care about this village and wants to see and does care about these people. And so, with a smile on his face, Klaus helps Jesper get back to the sled as they go off into the night and start delivering presents to all the kids of Smearmsburg. And sure enough, the next day, all the children wake up with toys under their trees, and all just happy and excited. And so, yeah. From there, the movie starts kind of getting ready to wrap up. As through narration from Jesper, we learn that he and Alva did eventually get together and got married, and they're now living happily. Jesper continued staying in Smearmsburg, and sure enough, things in Smearmsburg did get better. Everyone continued getting along, and eventually, well, the whole feud between the Crumbs and the Ellingbows kind of went down the crapper when the two big burly members of their families got married, and so as a result, old man Ellingbow and old lady Crumb are now in-laws. Something they're not exactly happy with, but they can't do anything to stop it now. So, yeah, the feud is officially over, whether they like it or not. And so in the meantime, when it came down to the whole Christmas operation, like Klaus said, it just kept growing. Every year they would include more and more villages in it, and as a result, it would be more ground for Klaus and Jesper to cover, but every year they kept it up, and every year just kept getting better and better than the last. Every year Jesper would always come back to see Klaus, deliver letters. They would just hang out and chat and just be friendly. But ultimately, as you do, Klaus got older, and he was already an old guy when this thing was starting. And so as the years go by, he does get older and older, and it's clear he's not exactly as strong as he was once upon a time. He's still clearly a strong guy, but he is getting weaker. And so on the 12th year, well, that's when he has to finally pay his dues, so to speak. As while he's out in the forest chopping wood, the wind picks up again and directs him towards a hill. And when Klaus sees it, he smiles, puts his axe down, and says, "I'm coming home, Lydia," as he walks up the hill and vanishes. And no one sees him again. Jesper goes around and talks to everyone, but nobody's seen hide nor hair of Klaus, and it just looks like he just disappeared. So, yeah, that does kind of worry people, but as you do, life did go on. Smearmsburg continued to prosper and became a better place, and in the case of Jesper and Alva, they eventually had kids. And Jesper, of course, Jesper is a good father to them. He treats them happily and is nice to them, and so, and yeah, and of course, everything just seems to be going well. But there is something different, something even more different than not having Klaus there, because you see, while Jesper may not know how, every Christmas Eve, he gets to see his friend again. And the movie ends with him in his living room setting out a plate of cookies and a glass of milk as he sits in front of the fireplace, and as he sits down for a nap, he hears a thumping on the window which gets his attention. And thus, that's where the movie ends. So, yeah, that was Klaus. And my thoughts on the movie? It's beautiful. This movie is beautiful. Here's the thing. Like I said, from a quick glance, it looks as though the movie is kind of like your run-of-the-mill average Christmas special that's supposed to retell the story of Santa Claus. It's, however, when you actually really sit down and watch it and look deeper into it, you can see that there's a lot more effort put into this movie than you think. And you can see that immediately from the very first scene. I know I'm doing these things by a vlog, so you can't actually watch the movie while I'm doing this, but the animation for this film is brilliant. When I first saw this movie, I swore that I thought that some of that the whole film used 3D animation that they rotoscoped over, because it just looks that good. All the characters look so fleshed out and realized. They all look so unique and different. The environment's so vast and colorful, also amazing and beautiful, that I kept thinking to myself, this must be 3D animation. They must have like rotoscoped it or something. They maybe could have drawn over it, but no. The whole film is hand-drawn, and it's beautiful. Now, I'm sure it's like, they obviously drew it with used digitally, of course, as I don't think even traditional hand-drawn animation, I don't think hand-drawn animation on paper would eventually become this, because you can't make animation look, because I don't think hand-drawn animation can look this good with that. I mean, I'm not knocking like paper hand-drawn animation, because it looks good too. That still looks good. There are plenty of older cartoons that still look amazing even today. I'm just saying that if you watching this movie, it's and knowing that everything in it is actually animated, is actually 2D animation, it makes it all look even more impressive. It all looks so beautiful, so unique. The environment's so fitting for each scene, and it works well towards every moment that we have in the movie. And again, they use it well. Basically, they set a mood. Basically, every single scene sets a mood for what it's supposed to be. Like when Jesper goes out to Smearmsburg, when Jesper goes out to Smearmsburg, like I said, you get a sense of just how foreboding and creepy this place is, just from how dark and gray the designs of the town is, from the snow, just how cold and isolated and angry this place really is. You can really feel the hatred that this town is built upon in just every creek and crevice of every building. It's really perfect and creepy. And again, it works as a great introduction even to Klaus as well. As before he gets into what we would expect from Santa Claus, giving out toys and riding out into the night and all that stuff, he really comes across as a very imposing and scary figure, very socially distant. Without even saying a word, you really get a sense of just how not friendly this guy is. Like, he doesn't show any abject anger towards Jesper, and he means him no harm, but he also clearly does not want him there in the beginning. And the instant Jesper ends up leaving his property, you can tell he's content to just let Jesper run off and never see him again, with the only reason that he ends up seeking Jesper out again after that being when he finds the kid's drawing. And considering that it seemed to be a message from his late wife, because yeah, it's heavily implied that the wind is supposed to be his wife reaching out from the other side, it does kind of help. It lights up a spark in him, makes him decide, maybe I'll do something nice for this guy. And so he seeks Jesper out so that they can deliver a toy to this kid's home. I like that. And both of these scenes really do help showcase that despite Klaus's rough exterior, there is a warmth in there. When the kid finally gets his toy, the way the scene is structured just shows the simple joy of a kid waking up one morning and receiving a present from out of nowhere. And it does it well by showcasing how dark and cold his home is. And yet, just as he opens this present and gets his little wind-up frog, there's a light coming from a lantern. And that light is both literal, in the case of the lantern, and a metaphorical, because this toy is probably one of the only lights he has in his life. And the way we see Klaus looking in on him as he takes in the simple joy of a child happy to get something, to get just to get a toy, you can see that you can see that underneath all that anger and resentment is the heart of a man who just wants to bring joy to kids' lives. And as the film goes along, we start seeing that light come out more and more. And again, going back to the visual storytelling, another way they help showcase that is when Jesper seeks Klaus out to get him on board with, delivering presents. As we see, as before, he's out in the middle of a forest and it's all dark and cramped and gray and dreary, but then as the sun comes up, light comes in, just so we see that he's actually been taking his time in the forest to make birdhouses. It's nice. And as we see the number of them, we see that he does that. While he may put up a rough exterior, he cares a lot more than you think, as the number of birdhouses than the trees are a lot. There's a lot of trees he slaughtered to make those things, and it's clear the effort went towards a good place, as all the birdies of the forest have some place to live. And again, it's all just so beautiful and also well done. I love that as light starts coming more to the lives of our main characters, so too does Smearmsburg light up. And so what was once this drab and dreary town is now lit up with life and color and joy and niceties. It's all just shown beautifully through each bit of scenery, and it really gives you a great warm feeling inside. It's just touching. I like that, and I just love how they showcase it. The simple and how, and I'll get to the message in the film in a minute. But kind of going off of that, even the music is beautiful as well, as the music knows when to be silly, when it wants to be imposing and disturbing when it needs to. And when we get to a really touching moment, the music it accompanies it so well. I forget the song that was playing. I forget the name of the song that was playing when Jesper and Alva were helping Margot write a letter to Klaus, but I think it was called Invincible. But it's a beautiful song that works well as we see this montage of Klaus and Alva as they're learning what Margot wants from Klaus. And again, going back to the whole visual storytelling thing, well, everything is bright and happy with Jesper and Alva. Things are dark and dreary back with Klaus, since this is after he told Jesper to piss off. And then as he starts realizing that maybe he does want to help Jesper and and that spark is reignited, he goes to the warm, and we see that things are getting a lot better. Hell, even when they're out going to the Sami village, it still feels a lot more warm, as they're at least doing it together. As it's again, and I want to love again when they're going out to the Sami village, at first dark and windy and cold, and it gives you just a sense of unease because you have no idea if this is going to work or not. But again, the instant the sun comes up and Margot sees her new bobsled, the joy is just so well, and the way that Invincible crescendos in that scene is just, it's beautiful, and I love it for that. And it's that way throughout the rest of the movie. The music knows when to be quiet when it needs to be, when it needs to be excited and loud and fast paced, and it fits every scene perfectly. It's just a joy to watch in that regard. And to kind of get it going off of that, let's talk about the characters as well, as all the characters do have their own individual arcs, or at least the main characters do. Mogins doesn't really have an arc. Like I said, he's just kind of a smartass throughout every one of his appearances in the movie, and I won't deny, he does, as a smartass, he works brilliantly. When he first appeared when I first saw him, when I first saw this movie and I saw him, I was like, okay, I like this guy. But then but after a while, I felt that his his jabs at Jesper were starting to get a little meaner, and so I thought, okay, maybe he can rein it in a bit. But then he started working it back in ways that actually were funny, and so I thought, okay, I like you again. Then he started pushing it a little more, and I thought, okay, you're starting to, okay, maybe you need to back off again. But eventually he worked back around to being my favorite character, as when he realized Jesper was sad leaving Smearmsburg, he decided, maybe I'll use my smarminess for good this time and convince his dad, and ultimately let his dad know, hey, something's up with your son. Which again brought him back around to being my favorite character. He doesn't have a lot to him, but he's a great character. Like I said, you can tell that, like Alva, he finds that this job of being the ferryman to bring people to Smearmsburg is not a good one. He does not like what he does in Smearmsburg, but it's still a living, and someone pays him for it, so he's got to do it. And likewise, because the job is such a shit job, he just finds enjoyment wherever he can, and that enjoyment comes from messing with people and just kind of poking at them when he finds the right opportunity. He does that with Jesper in the beginning, which is great because Jesper kind of deserves it, since he was an ass in the beginning of the movie. And then likewise, when Jesper and Alva start getting closer, he kind of starts mocking him for that too. Like when Jesper sees Alva off, sees Alva off in the post office in one scene. There's Mogens outside just going mwah mwah mwah. Like dude, this guy's hilarious. I love it. And even the final scene where he just kind of helps emphasize to Jesper's dad that something's up with Jesper. It's like, well, I wouldn't think about too much about it. It's certainly not something that would eventually that would build up into resentment and loathing and all that. I love that. It's funny. It's really good. Fun, which I'll get back to what I feel about the humor in this movie later. But again, it works. It works. And again, likewise, then there's Alva. While she's not the primary focus of the movie, I do like her arc in the movie. As, like with Mogens, she herself also kind of feels dead inside with from her time in Smearmsburg. And so as a result, she wants to get out of here as quickly as possible, much like Jesper does. It's just that whereas Jesper has to send out a bunch of letters and before he can leave Smearmsburg, Alva has to pay her way to get out of here. And so she's been doing it by being a fishmonger. But then when Jasper gets his whole operation of having kids send letters to Klaus up and running, immediately that begins having a kickback as he sends kids her way so they can learn how to read and write. And while at first she just wants the kids to get the hell out of here and leave her alone so she can actually get to the job that'll get her out of this hellhole, little by little she starts appreciating having the kids there. And when she sees them lighting up as they learn new things, in turn brings the spark of life back to her. She little by little likes seeing these children come back. She likes seeing them be nice to each other. She loves seeing them actually learning things. There's one scene where as the schoolhouse is transitioning from a fishmonger station to an actual schoolhouse, we see the fish parts of the building get moved out and be little by little replaced with what you would see in a school, with chalkboards, with proper desks, and like lines where they hang the fish are suddenly having lines of drawings the kids made for Alva. It's really sweet, and I loved how little by little you see that joy come back to her. And at first she's embarrassed about it because, hey, she's supposed to be Alva, she's supposed to be the cynic, but likewise she just happily welcomes it. And by the end of the movie, you can tell that she's just happy to actually find joy in her life again. And yes, it means giving up her savings, but the Smearmsburg that we end the movie on is not the same Smearmsburg that she wanted to get away from, and so she doesn't really see a reason to want to leave. I love that. And then, of course, there's Klaus himself, which, yeah, like I said, he's not the main character, so to speak, but he is a major character in the movie. I mean, okay, he is a main character, he's just not the main character. Anyway, but whatever. I like the arc with him. In most versions of the Santa story, Santa is usually set up as this already kind figure who just wants to help kids out and do the right thing. And likewise, ultimately what leads him to becoming the Santa Claus that we know is through some kind of magical mishap. Like in the Rankin Bass Santa Claus Comes to Town special, Santa was raised by elves in that story and learned how to make toys, and the bits and pieces that were magical were things that he slowly added to his repertoire in order to make giving toys easier to do. And so eventually, with all the added help of that, he became the Santa that we know. Or likewise, there's Santa Claus the movie, where Santa was still a jolly old man that gave presents to people, but he was ultimately also a prophesied legendary figure who became Santa, who the elves brought in to deliver all their toys, because they knew he was just so full of joy and love for all the kids that he deserved the job. Again, most origin stories for Santa have him already be the jolly old guy, and then beginning into a position where the magic spreads out. But the whole point of this movie is getting him to be that jolly old guy. Because in the beginning of the movie, he's very closed off. And you understand why. After all, he did once have that spark of life to him, but after he and his wife failed to have kids, and then his wife died, he started wondering, what's the point of all this? Why should I be so happy with everything? There's nothing to be happy for right now. And so he just kind of closed himself off, showing little bits of goodness and light every now and then, but ultimately content to just kind of keep to his lonesome. But it isn't until Jesper starts knocking on his door that he starts feeling that spark again. As he sees that kid's drawing and thinks this kid needs a toy, and thus he delivers it to him and finds joy in seeing the kid happy. And then as he continues helping Jesper out by delivering presents to all these kids, you can see that he's actually having fun with it. And his friendship with Jesper continues bringing that life back into him. As at first he was just content to sit in Jesper's coach and let him deliver all the gifts, but then he starts actually opening up more, talking with him more. As at one point when Jesper is had more trouble with a fireplace and was nearly burned up, when Jesper gets back, he's like, "What happened? What happened?" And Jesper just tells him to shut it. They keep going, and he grovels about how apparently all the kids think that Klaus is the magical one, and Klaus is like, magical? Again, I like that. And we see that as time goes on, they get more and more excited to be with each other. When they get the reindeer all hooked up to the sleigh, they just are excited and happy and enjoying the ride. And as they realize they're enjoying it together, they're like, yes, you're good. Strong reindeer. That's really good. Like, you can see them just gradually growing closer. And Klaus starts just little by little coming out of his shell, becoming a much jollier and happy person. We start seeing the life come back to him. And while he does still have one thing holding him back, that with his wife, as he little by little realizes all the good he's been doing, he just allows himself to feel happy again, and eventually it gets to the point where he's like, you know, why don't I just keep making toys for all these kids? I like seeing them happy, and it's doing good in this town, and I love it. And he decides, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep doing this. Even when it's revealed that Jesper set this whole thing up just to, get the required letter quota that he wanted to meet before, well, he still keeps the operation running. Because, yeah, it may have been built on a lie, but what they were doing was still genuinely nice. And yeah, he's disappointed with Jesper, but he still made friends. He still opened up to so many other people, and he still loves seeing the joy in children's eyes. And when he finally realized that Jesper is now doing everything for very selfless reasons and is willing to put his life on the line just to make sure the kids are happy, it kind of brings out that last bit of joy in him as he's happy to continue delivering presents with his best friend. It's so sweet and loving, and by the very end of the movie, when he does become the magical Santa Claus, which they never explain how that happened, which I dig, it actually feels very natural. It feels very natural and nice, and it just gives it a grand weight to it. That him becoming Santa is not just something that he worked towards, but it's like a gift, and they never confirm. And I like that they never explain what happened to him, what eventually led him to becoming the Santa Claus that we know. But at the very least, we see him become that kind of... I love the arc that we see of him becoming this cold loner to the jolly fat man that we all know and love. And then, of course, we get Jesper. I love Jesper's arc in this story. Like I said, in the beginning of the movie, he was very much just... I love how they handle it here. And I love the gradual transformation. And what brings it out is when he like with Alva, when he starts seeing the joy that his actions are bringing. Yes, at first he's doing it all for selfish reasons. But little by little, he starts seeing the light coming out. And as Klaus once said, one true act of goodness will create another. And as such, as Jesper's actions begin having a domino effect across Smearumsburg, we see that he starts taking it all in, and he starts feeling happy, content in what he's doing. And we start seeing that he's actually starting to find joy in his life, and it all comes from him actually opening up and empathizing with other people, caring about them, wanting them to be happy. And believe it or not, it all started with Klaus. In the case of Klaus, when it came down to Klaus, he at first saw him as a means to an end. As Klaus would get, as the kids would write the letters, and he would send them off to Klaus so that Klaus could get the presents. But then, as they spent more time with Klaus and grew closer to him, and grew closer to them, he started little by little, actually finding someone that he could confide in, he could talk to and share stuff with. And likewise, while he and Klaus do kind of hit their own little stride, it isn't until he starts seeing all the good that he's done in Smearmsburg that he starts realizing, maybe I don't want to leave, because he sees all of his actions have indirectly made everyone's lives better. Him talking about the naughty list made kids act nicer to one another in order to act nice to one another, which in turn not allowed them to grow closer, which in turn allowed their parents to grow closer, which in turn kind of broke down all the barriers of hate that were surrounding Smearmsburg and made everyone in the community come together, abandoning their hate for the sake of joy. It was just beautiful, and it was nice, and I like that. And then likewise, as Jesper decides to finally do a selfless act for Margot, as he brings her to Alva so she can get so that her letter can get translated, and thus so that her letter can get translated. It's beautiful because, like I said, he gets nothing from that. She didn't deliver a letter the proper way, so it doesn't technically count towards his quota. And at the time, Klaus did not want to make any more toys, and he told Jesper to get the hell off his property. So Klaus was not going to be making anything. But nevertheless, Jesper still put his best foot forward, and he tried to make a sled. And yes, Klaus did eventually help him make the sled, but the fact that he went to all this effort because he wanted to make Margot happy, and the way that he lit up when he saw her be happy, it essentially just showed him another side of life that he never considered. That ultimately what brings him joy is making others happy, and he wants to continue making others happy. It's why by the end of the movie, he doesn't want to leave Smearmsburg, because through his actions, while indirect, he did make everything brighter. He brought everyone closer. And at the end, and ultimately, he thinks, why would I want to leave all that? It's just beautiful and nice, and it really does encapsulate the message that Klaus told him, that a true act of goodness will create another. And ultimately, by giving all these gifts to kids and telling about the naughty and nice list and all that, he made things better, and that in turn had an effect on him. I love that. It's sweet, it's beautiful, and it's full of heart, and I just love how, well, human it feels. It's very human. It's very human, which again, I'll get back to that when I get to all my thoughts on the movie. Which actually, kind of going off of that, what would initially kind of fool you about this special, in my opinion, is the fact that in the beginning, it feels a lot more humorous than a traditional Christmas special. At least most other Christmas specials at least try to give some weight to what they're doing and ultimately try and showcase that, oh, this is something magical because it's about Christmas, it's about Santa and all that stuff. But the film immediately is a tone setter in that while it starts somewhat magical as we get Jesper narrating about how the whole thing with Santa got started with a single letter, well, everything kind of comes to a head Things are mainly a tone setter as we see all these mailmen organizing letters, and then we see Jesper out on the field, just, in a tent, just getting a cappuccino. It's clear, yeah. From there, you immediately get a sense of that, and it immediately just creates that sense of weirdness. And and as a result, while it does still kind of fit into into some corny, cartoonier aspects in that regard, it works to the film's benefit because these cornier cartoon aspects are actually a nice way, I think, to pull in kids, because it's silly enough. It's not too silly that it falls into the realm of absurd. But it is loose enough that that ultimately what brings the joy later in the movie is not by some forced happiness, it's by allowing the actions to speak for themselves. And kind of going off of that, the humor is funny. It's really funny. I already talked about how Mogens was my favorite character for just how much of a smarmy jackass he was, but Jesper in the beginning of the movie, there's real fun and humor in seeing Jesper suffer when he's a giant ass to everyone. There's just some Schadenfreude in seeing him struggle as he's trying to make his way to Smearsburg, seeing him freak out when he accidentally rings the battle bell and everyone and the Crumbs and Ellingbows just start duking it out right there in the middle of town with Jesper caught in the middle. There was some great humor. There's great humor in seeing him suffer as he's at the post office, seeing him freaking out when he meets Klaus, seeing him have to go into all the houses by himself while Klaus just sits comfy out in the coach outside. And I love I love how most of the traditions that are established with Santa are him just kind of cutting quarters in some areas. I like how he set up the naughty and nice list because one particular kid was an ass to him, and so he decided, if you're naughty, you don't get presents. Do you want that? You don't want to be on Mr. Klaus's naughty list. And that alone made the whole thing funny because he just puts the fear of God into this kid and then just strolls right on back into the post office with music saying, "Don't mess with the postman." It's perfect, and I love it. And I just love seeing, and again, it's just, there's so much humor in seeing that suffering, but on top of that, there's even some more humor with the Crumbs and Ellingbows. But like old lady Crumb is clearly the smarter of the two elders, and with us when they end up forming their little truce, it makes it all funnier as she's able to easily see what they need to do in order to try and put the town back to its proper ways, and yet old man Ellingbow is like, "What are we doing?" Like when it comes to letters, she's saying, "I think someone needs a little bit of help." It's like, "Okay, who?" It's like, "What?" And then when they actually do get rid of Jesper and they target Klaus is like, "One down, one to go." And then just about to say something, say, "If you ask who, I swear." It's, again, the humor in the movie feels perfect. It doesn't overstay its welcome in any regard, and it doesn't end up overshadowing the story or the message. The humor knows exactly what parts to hit, with maybe a couple occasions with Mogens being a little too inappropriate, but there is still some joy in just seeing all this craziness going down but the humor itself is just, it's perfect. It knows exactly where to hit, stays exactly as long as it needs to, and then steps back whenever we need to focus on character and story and so forth. And I dig it for that. But of course, that also brings us to what I think really makes this film a perfect Christmas movie. The set, the tone, the message. Like I said, when it comes to other Christmas specials, they try and give it like some bit of grandiosity and weight. But what I think makes this film work is that nothing feels forced, because the first half of the movie focused on comedy and these weird situations. We have some of these weird situations in the state of Smearsburg. We're given a sense of just what you're given a sense that this really isn't meant to be like a feel-good Christmas movie, and it feels very intimidating and disturbing as a result. But it also means that when we actually do see those little moments of light and all the good it starts bringing, it makes it hit a little harder. The emotions feel a lot stronger as a result, and you start feeling more for what these characters are going through, what they're doing, and just like Klaus when he saw the kid playing with the wind-up frog, you start feeling the simple joy of just bringing some light back into these people's lives, and just seeing that gradual progression as the film goes on. It makes the heartfelt moments feel so real. Feels so much stronger when they're not just, throwing, "Oh, Christmas is a time of goodwill and nice and cheer" in your face. It's literally just letting the moments speak for themselves. It emphasizes everything perfectly. And I love how it dispenses its message that a single act of goodness can lead to another. That ultimately that goodness itself is essentially a self-growing organism. That from doing a simple good deed, it can create more and cultivate it, leading to more good deeds. And we see that throughout the movie. Jesper unintentionally starts doing good deeds as he and Klaus are handing out presents, which in turn starts making the kids more excited as they have something to look forward to in their lives. But then, of course, things get even bigger when Klaus starts when Jesper starts bringing in the naughty and nice list idea, which in turn makes the kids start acting nicer to one another. And so as they try and start doing more good deeds for people, it starts breaking down barriers as the adults start little by little getting closer to one another. And likewise, because Jesper sent the kids to Alva, it helped bring that spark back and made life better for her. We see with Klaus that him helping out all these kids and becoming friends with Jesper has brought that life back to his life, and just by doing all these little things for all these different people, he made life better for them. And that had a multiplier effect. Everyone else continued benefiting and growing, not because of some sappy message about wanting to help people, which maybe you can argue that the whole a pure act of goodness creates more goodness could easily fall into that, but the film preaches what it but the film practices what it preaches, and the way they showcase it is brilliant. It's not forced. It's not in your face with the message. And I feel like there's only like one scene in the movie where maybe they were a little in your face about it, and that's when Jesper was telling off Old Lady Crumb and Old Man Ellingbo. Before anyone says they have names, I don't remember their names, so whatever. But even then, I think it worked well because it came at a moment when their respective kids started getting together, and those two big kids decided to get married. It's again just sweet, and it's just so sweet, and the whole film is just the film radiates that same warmness and comfort and kindness, and like I said, none of it feels forced. All of it feels wonderful. All of it feels sweet. All of it feels joyous, and it just makes this film, in my opinion, a perfect Christmas movie. It captures the essence of what the holiday is supposed to be about perfectly. The joy, the merriment, the simple pleasure of bringing light to another human being's life, and how that can make other people's lives better. It can make your life better. In my opinion, it's beautiful and well done, and this film does it perfectly. If I have to list only one complaint with this movie, only one major complaint, is that I hate that it's exclusive to Netflix. I want this movie on DVD. I want to add it to my Christmas film collection because it's just so good. I want to be able to watch it whenever I want. Even if I watch it out of season, I want to be able to enjoy the movie whenever I can and not have to worry about having to use Netflix or having the internet go down. My point is, I want this film. I want to be able to own it because it is just such a pure, sweet, and beautiful movie that does a great job at not only retelling the story of Santa, but also showcasing a story of goodness and comfort, and how it can ultimately make everyone's lives better and bring out the best in us, to bring out our best selves, create and ultimately make everything better. It's just a sweet, heartfelt movie full of laughs, great characters, great writing, amazing scenery, amazing music. Hands down, Klaus is just an amazing movie, and if you have not seen it yet, I highly recommend it. And I will say, if you haven't seen, if you haven't, yeah, just make it one of those films you watch every Christmas, because trust me, you won't regret it. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope that everyone watching this video has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'll see you Christmas Day in 2024 with the next Christmas special. So till then, I hope you have a Merry Christmas and take care.